All right. Well, today I wanted to talk about why men don't approach women in 2024. A lot of these reasons will be reasons that have existed in the past, but I think some of the reasons are certainly more applicable nowadays. The biggest reason men don't approach women would be fear of rejection. Rejection is hard to face for almost all men. Some men take rejection much harder than others. Rejection can sting when someone you find attractive doesn't reciprocate your interest. Rejection can also hurt your self-esteem, as someone not liking you can make you look inward and bring up old insecurities that you had. Rejection can be brutal because in a way it's basically a woman saying to you at that exact moment, I don't want to reproduce with you, and I don't want your genes to live on. It's kind of sad, but it's true. The next reason would be a fear of a bad rejection or public humiliation. Two stories pop up in my head. I had approached a girl way back when I was an overweight, balding, sweaty, protrusive sub-5 male early on in college. And I remember this girl looked at me and immediately said, "Oh, hell no." And then she walked away briskly after that. She said it pretty loud because we were in like a quieter area of the bar. And a good amount of people around heard. My friend that was next to me talking to her friend had heard as well. And this felt very embarrassing at the time. Another time I introduced myself to two girls at a party, also when I was overweight and balding, and they had introduced themselves as the one girl introduced herself as the girlfriend of Max, and the other girl introduced herself as the girlfriend of Seth. Well, it turns out that neither Seth or Max had girlfriends when I spoke with them. And these rejections definitely stung at the time, like they really stung. And looking back, I was definitely trying to swing out of my league at the time. They definitely got me down at the time, but also motivated me to lose the weight and restore my hair at the same time. But to be honest, bad rejections, they're a bit scarring. You never really forget those bad rejections, and they definitely stick with you for a while and can cause other insecurities to surface. The next reason would be looking bad in front of your friends. This is one that I've definitely experienced. When you're out with your friends, maybe on a night out, I've definitely not approached certain women occasionally, even if I was getting some sort of subtle or clear sign of interest, out of the fear of like looking bad in front of my friends. And I think sometimes your friends may view you in a certain way, and by potentially getting rejected in front of them, it may change how they feel about you. This is definitely something you can work through because, if your friends view you in a negative light for getting rejected, they probably aren't the kind of people you want to be hanging out with. But something can still be said about that. Maybe your friends know you as the guy who gets a lot of girls, and you don't want this image to be ruined, so you shy away from going up and introducing yourself to an attractive girl out of the fear of rejection. The next reason is expected outcomes. So when I was a former fat, balding, sweaty, Cheeto-stained sub-5 male, virtually none of my approaches were met well. Most of my approaches were either met with a confused look on their face, I got ignored, I got a disgusting stink face, or at best it was like a polite conversation, but completely platonic. And this was expected looking back now, but this happens to a lot of below average looking guys when they approach. Average looking guys usually either get, some sort of neutral reception, ignored some of the time, and then they'll get positive reception when, that guy is the girl's type. But for a lot of average and below average looking guys who continue experiencing poor results when they go up to women and approach, the question for them can kind of feel like, well, why bother? The next reason would be dating apps. To keep it a buck, it's much easier to swipe and meet with girls rather than go out to a bar or club and approach in person. With dating apps, you already know the girl has swiped right on you and likes you to some extent. Now, this isn't always the case, as there are endless girls just looking for quick attention, girls looking for foodie dates, and then you got your good old Instagram clout chasers. But the vast majority of the time, the matches you get are fairly warm. And I think from a practical standpoint, it's just a lot easier to set up a date with a girl from a dating app than drive to a bar or club, deal with the loud music, long lines to get in the club, and just a chaotic environment, go through all of that to walk up to girls and, risk potential rejection. With that being said, I definitely still do approach girls at bars and clubs, and advise guys to do the same. If you're say you're at a bar or you're at a club in your city, go for it. If you find a girl that's attractive, walk up and talk to her and see what happens. But going back to dating apps, it's just much easier to meet up with a girl from a dating app. I feel like since the pandemic, dating apps are the number one way people meet nowadays outside of meeting people through their social circle. The next reason is self-esteem. This kind of goes hand in hand with rejection, but having a low self-esteem makes it much more difficult to approach women in person. To be honest, I've never been someone who has had a high self-esteem, and this has definitely inhibited me in the past from approaching women at certain times when I found them attractive. And I think when guys have a past of struggling, whether it be getting rejected a lot, being ghosted, being flaked on, these all will have an effect on, a guy's self-esteem. And simply put, it doesn't feel good to be flaked on, ghosted, or rejected. I think a lot of men just don't want to deal with dating nowadays because of those reasons. And I think it's the feeling of just not being good enough that is a big contributor of guys not wanting to approach a woman they find attractive. I think the next reason is not knowing what to say or navigate a conversation. When you walk up to a complete stranger, it can be difficult to know what to say, especially if you don't have a lot of experience talking to different types of people. Carrying a conversation can be very difficult. It can feel very awkward and forced and kind of feels like you're fumbling a football, especially when the girl isn't attracted to you. If the girl's attracted to you, the conversation will typically run smoothly. At least that's how it was for me in high school and college. A lot of the times when I would approach certain women, I just didn't know how to really navigate that conversation very well. And, when I was overweight early on in college, obviously I wasn't met with, good positive reception. And, those things, like I said, not knowing how to navigate that conversation and carry it forward can be very difficult for a lot of guys. And, a lot of men would just rather not go up and go through that because it's just easier. The last reason is kind of relates to the macro environment of dating. I think with the rise of social media and apps like TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, and dating apps, I think guys are now more aware that dating has gotten a lot harder. And, women have access to, top tier guys on Instagram. Even below average women can get hundreds of matches a day on dating apps. And I think more, black pill, red pill, and manosphere channels are present nowadays. More guys are kind of waking up to how brutal dating is for most men. I think more guys are really more based on how dating really is nowadays. Not just like below average men or average looking guys, but I think, a lot of chads are more based than they were, 10, 15 years ago, even 5 years ago, just with the rise of all these new channels popping up and kind of telling the younger generation, like Gen Z, kind of how dating really is and how kind of like depressing the whole dating landscape is. And like I said, more data is coming out, that women think 80% of men are unattractive on dating apps. And I think most guys just don't want to deal with the constant struggle that is dating for average or below average looking guys. And, that can kind of come through when they're in a bar or club environment. They're kind of saying to themselves like, well, why bother? Like, why even bother approaching this girl? Because, the dating landscape is so competitive. And like I said, ideally, if you find a girl attractive, whether it's, at a bar or a club or, you see a girl in a store or, something like that, if you find her attractive and you want to go up and talk to her, absolutely go. I think you should go for it. But I think these are all the reasons why, most guys, especially in 2024, I think the final reason also is that men just don't want to be viewed as creeps. This definitely would apply, say, in high school, a small college, or like a small town in particular. Sometimes when a guy approaches a girl, that said girl can reject him and then go around and tell people that he's a creep. And then he gets that reputation as a result unfairly. Just choose to not approach women very often. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like. Feel free to comment down below why you don't approach women in 2024. And feel free to subscribe. Until next time, take care.